6, so I'm going to get started. Hi, I'm Laurel Moulton. I'm a integrated pest management specialist with the WSU Regional Small Farms Program. This talk is in the category of our Dirt Talk presentations, and Dirt Talks are always a partnership between an extension specialist and local farmers, and we basically try to dig into a topic, whether it's integrated pest management related or otherwise, that's important to local farmers. And it's important to have farmers involved, of course, to talk about their experiences, and then also we'll have a conversation afterwards, so anybody can pitch in. Today, the farmers who have joined me are Brian McWhorter, and then also Teddy Kraus from the Kitsap Conservation District. Their names were supposed to be on the slide, but for some reason, there's some technical difficulties, so I apologize. They are equal presenters in this talk. So Brian is from Butler Green Farm, and he's been dealing with striped cucumber beetles for I think 3 years now, and I think Teddy is in the same basket there, dealing with them at the Grace Farm at the Kitsap Conservation District. So I'm gonna present a little bit about the life history and the recommended management techniques for the cucumber beetles. We'll talk about both western striped cucumber beetles and western spotted cucumber beetles today, because I know there's folks out there dealing with both. And then Brian and Teddy will take the opportunity to talk about what type of management tactics they've tried and what might be working and what isn't working. We'll feel free to put questions in the chat box. I might make Teddy another host so that he can see. Teddy, can you do that? Can you check questions in the chat box? Because I can't see it while I have my presentation shared.
I will do my best.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, lack of planning on my part. So feel free to put your questions in the chat box. If there's questions that are related to clarifications, we'll answer them during the presentation, but otherwise we'll save them to the end. So yeah, we'll get started. Oh, and also I did put a link in the chat box, and that is completely separate from cucumber beetles and integrated pest management. But we're getting to that time of year where the sun is coming out, and although we aren't experiencing drought conditions currently, it's always something that's on our mind. So the link in the chat box is to a resource page about water conservation and water management, where you can find some great resources for that. All right, here we go. Oh, there they are. Okay. Cucumber beetle species. So around here, as far as I hope, as far as we know, we only have the western spotted cucumber beetle, otherwise known as the southern corn rootworm. And we also have the western striped cucumber beetle. There's a similar striped cucumber beetle located on the East Coast that oftentimes you'll hear more about, but these are the two that we have here. So the life cycle of the western spotted cucumber beetle, and they're both kind of the same. What I found, and maybe others who've done some research on this have found, is that the ecology and life cycle of cucumber beetles on the West Coast isn't particularly well studied. So, but this is what we know. Fertile females overwinter, and they disperse in April and May as the soil warms up. They lay their eggs in early spring at the base of host plants, and those take 7 to 10 days, depending on the soil temperature, to hatch. The larvae will hatch and feed on roots, stem bases, and then sometimes the rinds of fruit that are touching the soil. And usually that feeding and getting bigger. They go through 3 different instars, takes about 3 weeks. They go through a pupal stage, so kind of like caterpillars do, which is about 2 weeks. And around here, we believe that they can go through 2 generations per year. As the weather starts cooling down, the adults will overwinter in kind of in the top 2 inches of soil, and then under debris in and around the field. It's not always in the field. The western spotted cucumber beetle, they have a ton of different hosts, up to 200 different plant species, but the ones around here that we're concerned about for farming are cucurbits, so squash, cucumbers, and melons, beans, and specifically snap beans, not so much dry beans, and cut flowers. And then the larvae can feed on corn, sweet potatoes, and dahlia tubers. And I believe that the folks that I've gotten reports from for spotted cucumber beetles are usually cut flower farms. The western spotted cucumber beetle, it is mostly known for the damage that they cause on beans. So you can see a picture of that right there. In addition to just taking big bites and kind of scraping the skin on the beans, feeding on the flowers and the young beans can cause failure for the fruit to set. And so you can have just a smaller crop. They also feed on leafy greens and fruiting vegetables, but I have that in parentheses because that's considered, those aren't considered a main target of these, but when they're in high enough numbers, they can affect those. And then flowers for dahlia tubers, they can cause considerable damage to the tubers and the flowers. This is what the damage from larvae looks like. Sweet potatoes are becoming a more popular crop around this area, and the damage that the western spotted cucumber beetle larvae do to the tubers looks very similar to wireworms. If you go corn, corn is a favorite host of the spotted cucumber beetle, and that's why they're also called the southern corn rootworm. And that can cause seedling failure. They can damage it as it's germinating, and then stunting to the plants. For dahlias, they can kill small plants if they're feeding. I mean, if you're growing your dahlias from smaller starts instead of tubers, they can kill small plants. They can stunt the growth. And then if you're selling those tubers, the damage might be more of an issue. And then again, they can cause problems by adults feeding on the flowers and the leaves. Now for the striped cucumber beetle, this is the one that seems to be more common. The fertile females overwinter in or near cucurbit fields because these actually are very specific on cucurbits. So winter squash, summer squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, and melons. So these are more often overwintering in the field, but they can also overwinter on the edges of the field under tree bark and stuff like that. So they're not always in the field. They start being active when the soil temperature reaches 53 to 54 degrees. You'll notice that the life cycle is pretty much similar to the spotted cucumber beetle. So eggs are laid in early spring. They take 7 to 10 days to hatch. They're laid at the base of their preferred host plants, cucurbits. They take about 3 weeks to go through their larval stages and cause all that damage. They'll pupate in the soil, and these have 1 to 2 generations per year. This photo here is actually the larvae can cause damage to the skin of sensitive species such as melons. So this is actually the western striped cucumber beetle larvae on cantaloupe skins. I know not many people grow melons around here, but yeah, the larvae and the adult can cause damage to the fruit. The western striped cucumber beetle damage looks like this, and Teddy will recognize some of his pictures here. The adults can actually kill young plants or seedlings if they get them in the cotyledon stage. They can weaken stems. So on the young plants, they can chew through the stem enough that if it's windy, that will break the stems and cause the plant to collapse. Um, they feed on the flowers and the fruit, or the flowers and the pollen, excuse me. So that can cause poor fruit set and poor pollination. Um, they feed on the leaves, so you can see some pictures here where there's damage to the leaves, although foliar damage, if it's not heavy, isn't as much of a problem. Um, and they can feed on the fruit skins. And they prefer things that are, smooth. So when it comes to melons, they prefer honeydew. They might prefer zucchini to, something with harder skins. Um, and they can also be vectors of disease. The one that you'll read most about is a type of bacterial wilt, but that doesn't occur on the West Coast. That problem is pretty specific to the eastern striped cucumber beetle and squash on the East Coast. So we don't worry about them vectoring wilt, but they can also vector squash mosaic virus and black rot, which is a storage rot. The larvae in the soil can cause seedling failure if they're in young in seedlings, and then stunted plants by damaging the roots. So we'll get into the integrated pest management of this. Generally, action thresholds are not well developed, but I found a few in the literature. Um, so over here we've got winter squash and pumpkins for foliar damage in larger plants. They can let's see. Sorry, I've got a block. 20% leaf damage for cotyledons. So that's a lot, but not a ton. And then some bigger squash plants can withstand up to 50% damage, and some even up to 60%, but I left it 50% here. And this is the first through the third leaf of winter squash. So when they're big, but not their full size. Another threshold that has been used is 1 beetle per 10 row feet of squash in seedlings. These thresholds tend to be pretty low because farmers, you don't like to gamble with your crops. So 1 beetle per 10 row feet. And then for beans, there's some very specific thresholds that much larger farms use, and they would go out with a sweep net and sample throughout the field. And if they do 10 sweeps of the net over the rows and get 2 to 4 beetles on average throughout the field, then that's when they would think about treating the field. You can also use yellow sticky traps, but just know that yellow sticky traps can also be attractive to other insects that may be beneficial. But if you get 2 beetles per day per trap, that is a threshold that some people use. Both of these thresholds are very conservative. And those yellow sticky traps you would leave out for 10 days before doing that calculation. There's other thresholds that are used, like down in Southern California, for melon crops, but I put stars next to all of these because they're particularly the last 3 of them are used in larger farms with really low thresholds. So as an organic grower and knowing your customer, you may allow more damage than these guys would. So so you've established you have a problem, we'll talk about some cultural, biological, and chemical means that you can use to manage them. And just a note, according to the WSU and Oregon State University literature, trap crops have not been proven in the Pacific Northwest. This doesn't mean that you can't try them or that they don't work. There's just not enough data to say that they do work. So here's I'm going to start with a striped cucumber beetle. and they prefer Cucurbita maxima species. So those include Hubbard squash and buttercup squash. But the Cucurbita maxima is also more tolerant to damage. So even though they're more attracted to that, the plants are more robust or the skins are thicker for various reasons. They're more tolerant to damage. Cucurbita pepo are they're definitely attractive, and this is where your zucchini and patty pan and those types of squash come in, and they have a delicate skin as well, so the cucumber beetles will cause more damage to that. But there's certain subspecies that are more attractive than others. I didn't find a list, but the fact that this is out there in the literature suggests that you could find a list. So I'm going to look for that, but you might also want to do that. Striped cucumber beetles prefer melons over all other cucurbits. And of course, we don't grow many melons here, but just keep that in mind if you do start growing them. And they particularly like honeydew, the smooth-skinned melons. So for striped cucumber beetle, you can do crop rotation, although it's not very effective. Basically, you want to plant your cucurbits as far away as possible from where you've planted them before. But I realize that, that's more practical on a farm that's hundreds and hundreds of acres. And I know most of the farms around here are pretty small. So that may not be something that's viable for you. Although you can use crop rotation in conjunction with floating row cover, which I'll talk about later. So another thing you can do is transplant instead of direct seed. As the plants get bigger, they're more resistant to the damage. And so that's why transplanting instead of direct seeding can help with that. This is a graph that I found of this, even though I'm talking about striped cucumber beetles. This is just a graph that shows when spotted cucumber beetles are flying, and just because their life cycles are very similar, I'm including that here. And it shows that the flying is early in the season. There's a flight of adults, and then they're basically underground, and so this is a good area to focus on if you're worried about above ground damage, or planting so that the larvae aren't already there, because they need that host crop to lay the eggs next to. So just looking at the flight patterns and targeting in places where you may not have as much damage. Okay, for the spotted cucumber beetle, the larvae prefer different species when they're larvae and when they're adults. So the biggest recommendation is don't plant corn next to squash if you have spotted cucumber beetles, because they feed on the roots of corn, and then they'll do damage to the flowers and the leaves and the fruit on squash. They also, when it comes to corn, planting in wet soils, planting after you've had cover crops, particularly if they have legumes included in them, and weeds, is worse for corn. So if you're planting corn, just think about that. There was some information in the literature that organic mulches can help with spotted cucumber beetles, and they included, for some reason, they included worm compost. It's not a mulch, but so they said that there was a study that showed that applying worm compost improved the health of the crop. So basically, it helped things grow faster and increased resistance to damage. There was a study that suggested that straw might impede access to the crop for spotted cucumber beetles. But this is specifically, the article was about spotted cucumber beetles and not striped. So I can't vouch for it either way, but this is one peer-reviewed article. And also they suggested that using organic mulches improves the habitat for beneficial organisms. So for both kinds of beetle, row cover can be effective. Squash plants specifically are tolerant to damage after they have 4 to 5 leaves. So if you can keep them covered that long, that can buy you some time. Tillage, there were a couple of studies that showed that cucumber beetle damage is worse on organic farms, and ones that practice low tillage because you aren't damaging the larvae in the soil, or bringing them to the surface for predators to feed on. Delayed planting can help with both species. Warmer temperatures equal faster growth, and bigger, stronger, healthier plants are more resistant to the feeding. And I have bean, squash, and dahlia in parentheses here because all of these can benefit from delayed planting. So for biological control, basically what I always say, and is true, biodiversity is good. So any practice you can have on your farm that increases biodiversity will get you some beneficial insects. So specific insects that are reported in the literature are wolf spiders. So like in the Lycosidae family, there's certain tachinid flies, and there's certain synapid wasps, or I can't remember if it's, anyway, they're tiny little wasps. These ones are shown. These ones are specific species that are parasitoids on the eastern spotted cucumber beetle, but there are some here on the west coast, both tachinid flies and these parasitoid wasps that will get the cucumber beetles that we have out here. Um, these um, these natural enemies can't be the only tool you're using, but they're always going to benefit. And then there's nematodes. There isn't, I put a star next to it because there's not a whole lot that they're not proven to be effective in the Pacific Northwest, but I wanted to share them because I know that a lot of local farmers are interested in this. So if you wanted to try nematodes, um, they typically need warmer soil temperatures to put them out there. And these are some species that were tried on the East Coast. The Steinernemia species showed a 50% reduction in beetles. I think this was the striped cucumber beetles. The Howardula reduced the lifespan and fecundity, so the number of eggs the females could lay, but the infection rate was low. The heterohabit, I can never pronounce that one. Anyway, the one that starts with the second one that starts with an H, there are studies that show it may reduce emergence of beetles, and same with the last one in there. I've been following some research that is going on at Cornell. They're looking at both nematodes and entomopathic fungi, and they're having trouble with the research because cucumber beetles are just really hard to study. That's why there's not more information out there. And they found good. Uh, they think this the second H species is promising. That's what they're saying, but they don't have statistically significant data. So if you want to try nematodes, what I would do is just go to your local agricultural supplier, and you're just going to want to read the label of any nematodes they have and see if it's labeled for cucumber beetles, and that's your best cue. Like I said, these are not proven effective in the Pacific Northwest, and but if you want to try them, then why not? With the entomopathic fungi that they tried at Cornell, Beauveria bassiana was a specific one. They actually dropped that out of the trial because it was not, they didn't think it was promising at all based on their preliminary results. Okay, for chemical, there's pheromones. This is not, the pheromones weren't on the list for the WSU, the Pacific Northwest handbook. That's information that's specific to the Pacific Northwest. But in one of the literature reviews on spotted cucumber beetles, they said that there was a cross attraction to vita lactone, which is an aggregation pheromone that's for the eastern striped cucumber beetle. So it didn't say anything about whether the western striped cucumber beetle would go after that, but they did find that spotted cucumber beetles did. So if you had access to, if you could find a product that uses this pheromone, you might try it. I'm not sure if there's any products that are labeled for use in Washington, but it's worth looking into. I just listed organic chemicals here because I think most of you guys are organic. And the limitation with chemicals is in the organic realm is you can only use them to go after the adults. There are no soil applied insecticides that are organic that are very effective. So kaolin clay, that's just clay, and it's a barrier. You have to reapply it every time you irrigate or anytime it rains, and that just provides a barrier and kind of hides the plants a little bit. Pyrethrins are a broad spectrum insecticide, so you have to be careful with those because they'll kill beneficials as well. Azadirachtin or neem oil is also a broad spectrum insecticide. And spinosad, spinosad products were listed in the literature, but they are not included in the Pacific Northwest handbook that WSU and OSU keep up to date specifically for our area. So if you're looking at spinosad products, you just have to make sure that they're labeled for use in Washington and that cucumber beetles are on the label. But the first three, kaolin clay, pyrethrins, and azadirachtin, we know there's products available in Washington for those. There's certain pesticides. There was a warning in the Pacific Northwest handbook. I'm not sure if this applies to the organic pesticides, but I thought I'd put it here. Cucurbits are particularly sensitive to certain pesticides, so just be careful when you're applying those. Here's some resources. The Pacific Northwest Pest Management Handbook is a resource that's kept up to date by Oregon State University and Washington State University, specifically for pests and products and management in the Pacific Northwest. But I also, Oregon State University had a really interesting article about spotted cucumber beetle. And then there were a couple articles that were literature reviews about the striped cucumber beetle and spotted cucumber beetle, which I thought were really helpful. So you might look those up as well. And with that, I'd like to hand this over to Brian, because I basically laid out what the literature says, but that doesn't mean that anything works here. And so Brian and Teddy are going to tell us a little bit about their experience with these beetles.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start then. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so what you did show us actually worked for me. I'll give a little bit of background on it. So yeah, it's like 3 years ago, and I grow a lot of zucchini, and I grow 3 plantings. First planting like 15th of May. So I transplant, and I put the transplants out, and within 3 days, there were adult striped cucumber beetles eating the growth tips. And within about 3-4 days, I would say they wiped out half the plants. So I had like 900 plants in that planting. And like I say, they were all transplants. And they were just going right for the growth, the new growth. And yeah, it was devastating. And there would be like 10, 15, 20 on each one of them. And I just kind of freaked, because I'd been growing zucchini in the same area for over 10 years and never really seen anything. So I sprayed pygamic is the name of that. But I was very careful, and I was spraying, and this is where I first contacted Laurel what I should do. And so as far as the life cycle, because like I say, it's a tough one on all pests. All bugs, insects. So I just want to make sure I was being careful with it. So I would spray, and so I started replanting, 'cause I had extra starts. I replant them and they just would hit it, and they just go down the rows. Yeah, it pretty much wiped out the first planting. So the second planting I put in, I didn't see as much effect on that. So like we were showing there that soil warmed up and they'd kind of gone through their cycle. So it was interesting. So third and fourth planting, not as much. And in a field, maybe 500 yards away, I'm growing lots of winter squash. And I saw a little bit of damage in the winter squash, nothing like the first and second planting of zucchini. So this is where I was figuring, because zucchini is a big one. That's a lot of plants, four plantings of 900 plants. So what was my strategy the next year? And Laura said, well, because I was wondering, are they in the soil? I mean, am I gonna have to, she said, no, the adults actually hibernate. And she would say, even in trees, anything around the border of the field. So the next year, second year, what I did was I held off on the first planting, because I said, once the soil warms up and they first come out, the adults are not going to find anywhere any, this is on zucchini, cuber bits available to start feeding on. So I waited on the first, so I planted the second and I covered it with the floating remake. And with that, I was able to keep them off the plants. And actually it was fairly successful. And the only really see after that was after I took them off, when there was good plant growth, I would see some in the flowers, but it didn't really hurt production that much. I mean, I probably lost sunflowers, but nothing like before. So at this point it was a relief, right? Because I was getting zucchini. So year 3, last year, same situation. I held off on the first planting, which hurts because I got a lot of production before on the first planting. So my production's down because I've lost a quarter of my plants by not planting the first planting. But I was real careful. I got the remay on, kept it on. I put hoops and stuff so to allow them to get really good sized zucchini before I took them off. And I'm pretty much able to fight them off. And again, I saw only evidence in flowers later on, and they were able to get into the winter squash again, but not a lot of damage. Situation is, like Laura was saying, I don't have hundreds of acres, so I can't rotate that much. I can go field to field, but these guys fly. But it's interesting because I do zucchini in other farms, and they did not like get in my truck or transfer or fly that distance, a mile or something to the next farm. So they've been all isolated in this one farm, and this one farm is isolated from all other farms, the one that I had the damage. So it's like right downtown Winslow. So there's not even a lot of gardens around or anything. So how it got there, is a mystery. And how it there were a lot of adults that hatched and were hiding for that first crop to come out in the spring, because it was devastating. I mean, it was, there was thousands of them. But the pyrethrin, the pygamic, knocks them back. And I'd spray about every 10 days, and when the next adults I see and hit them, and it'd knock them out, but they just kept coming. But so what suggestions that Laura gave were exactly worked for me. So that's good. Thank you.
I'm curious if you tried, would you try doing the earlier crop and doing row cover there, or what?
Maybe I'll do that to you, because it's planning right now for the next fertile sign next week will be when I'll start my first early zucchinis for transplants. So I'll try that. Yeah. And hopefully, like I said, I don't know where they all came from. I mean, if there is trace of them last year, are there enough adults hiding that are going to come out hibernation? But I'll try that. I will remake the first one. I'm not going to give up on it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the remake, it should, I think I didn't get back to the crop rotation in the presentation, but as long as you're not planting the zucchini exactly where you had cucurbits before, if you get that that floating row cover on before the beetles come in, then that it should be okay. Because the problem is that if they're only going to be in the soil there if you planted cucumbers there or right nearby. So but I'd be curious. I'd be curious if that if
Yeah, well, I till up that area, so, and I remove all the plant material. And I didn't cover crop in there, so I leave the field bare, so there's no any place for them to hide in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? Oh, so I was wondering, for a field where I had it, like the field where I had it really bad, I didn't replant in that field. So how many years before you feel good that I could go back into the field that had it before, that I wouldn't have to worry about? Because, yeah, if they're in the ground and I'm covering with remake, I don't want them hatching up into the,
Yeah.
because that's
Well,
the whole covered area.
luckily these only have 1 or 2 generations per year. That it's not like wireworms that stay in this that the larvae stay in the soil for 3 to 5 years. These actually you can just do it year to year.
Because you were recommending to rotate crops though. Rotate.
Yeah, um you can just a field that hasn't had squash in it for a year, you could move squash back into it, at least for cucumber beetles, because they're not going to stay there for more than 1 years. You might have, since they will overwinter outside of the field, you could have a few, but you're not going to get a heavy infestation if you leave it clear of, or if you don't grow cucumbers for just 1 season.
Well, that being said, makes this whole thing very worthwhile because
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah. Um, did you find, have you tried any trap cropping?
No, I haven't tried anything else. No, I just use the contact pyrethrin, to just knocks them dead right there,
Yeah,
Just concentrate, like, with a hand sprayer, so I'm not like just fumigating the field. Just
yeah,
contact a specific point, just right on the beetle. Because they're all
yeah.
congregated right on the growth tip.
And using a broad spectrum insecticide is, if you're just doing it on the seedlings, that is, you don't have the pollinators there, so you aren't going to worry about pollinators. And then applying it, in the evening or even at night, if the conditions are right, can help you avoid at least the pollinators. You can't avoid everything, but that will reduce the impact, and so that's a good thing to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I
Yeah.
noticed like they didn't like the heat of the day so much. You don't see them in the heat. You see them real early in the morning is when you see them in concentration on the growth tips.
Yeah.
So I sprayed really early, as early as I could.
Yeah. Actually, there's some research out of California, and I don't know if it gets hot enough here, but they found that oftentimes the beetles during the heat of the day, that's when they would hide. Well, they hide under the leaves, or they can hide under melons, because that's the big crop down in California that most of the research is on. But they get down low and hide under things to feed during the heat of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, Teddy, do you have I think you guys, have you tried trap cropping?
We were supposed to last year,
Yeah.
and I had a tooth issue, and I was out for like a week or two right when we were planting.
Hmm.
Um, and so we were going to trap crop with Hubbards. Um, and then the Hubbards just ended up everywhere in our fields, which was fine. But yeah, so we lost our red curry that year. Last year actually didn't have a good production on it, but they kind of just went for those compared to, say, our delicatas, and our acorns weren't even like, they didn't look at them basically. So that was kind of nice. And the funny thing to me is, uh, our zucchini are the ones that aren't hit for the most part. Not really that, like, I didn't lose any plants over the last 2 years. I don't think anyway. If it was maybe one or two, if any. Um, but yeah, our Hubbards are the ones that get destroyed.
Hmm. So Do you plant the same varieties of zucchini each year? Or and
I've been changing them actually, using
oh, okay.
different F1s. So
Okay,
that
I was just curious because there was one some of the literature said that there was um within the squash species Cucurbita pepo, which are zucchini are in, that there's some subspecies that are less susceptible. And so I was just curious, if you're always planting the same zucchini, maybe those are the ones that are more resistant, but
Mhm.
sounds like it's just a fluke.
What do you think about planting like Hubbards in an area to try to attract that first flush of adults in the beginning of the year I mean, I kind of like that, and I don't want to attract them to the garden, but I mean, if you were to get them away from your main crop,
Hmm.
something that would lure them, what do you think about that, the effectiveness of that?
Yeah, the according to the OSU and or WSU researchers, the trap cropping isn't proven to be effective in the Pacific Northwest. But again, that's when they say that, that's usually because there's not data. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't try it. But yeah, so you could, the cucumber beetles are attracted more to the Cucurbita maxima, which are, like buttercup and Hubbard and others of those. So you could try it.
Yeah, in our fields, our zucchini aren't, they're maybe like 40 feet from our winter squash and pumpkins. And so treating it kind of like a trap crop, it worked. I think it was close enough. We have our cucumbers, um, they're on the other side of a tree line about 100 feet away, and those weren't even touched either, which I guess they don't prefer them. But I was surprised to not see a single beetle 100 feet away, because I don't know, I figured I would. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Teddy, do you have any other observations or things that you were trying?
The first year we just dealt with it. I mean, our first the first picture I have of them was like July of 23. Um, and were freaking out, not knowing what to do. Um, and we just dealt with it and lost what we lost. It didn't seem that noticeable. I think it was just a small population compared to last year. And I sprayed the uh what's the pyrethrins. We used Botany Guard Max, um and it has something else in it. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but I sprayed that one time, um, and that seemed, either that or the actual cycle, the season, uh, seemed to help. Um, yeah, I'm most surprised about the end of the season, if you have cucumber beetles still around, how just they still go towards the, like, say we have our pumpkins, they're going towards the flowers that are still there. So you can just see a handful of cucumber or the striped beetles in a flower, and it's very easy to get rid of them when they're all together, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter anymore. But yeah,
Yeah, I suppose you could just grab a flower and squash it if it's so late in the season that nothing's gonna ripen.
I may have stepped on several flowers. Yeah.
I love it. I looked up the Botanigard and it's pyrethrin and the Beauveria bassiana, which is that entomopathic fungi. Which the entomopathic fungi has been tried on very different beetle larvae and things in the soil. So that's the one that Cornell didn't find useful in their cucumber beetles. But I think it's useful for other things around here. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um, let's see. And then Diane in the chat box, she said they did notice that they were more attracted to the Hubbard varieties. So do folks have Any other questions or observations?
So as far as mutating or becoming resistant to the thing like pyrethrin and stuff, have they done any studies on that where they've seen that?
Um, the studies I've seen with resistance are more with the conventional insecticides. Um, and yeah, I can't speak to that. I mean, on a small organic farm, I'm not sure that you're gonna. I mean, you still should be careful and definitely use a combination of techniques. Follow the row cover and different planting schedules and things like that. But um, yeah, the resistance literature that I've seen is mostly for the conventional insecticides used in large amounts on big farms.
Mhm. Yeah.
Are there any other folks on who have found cucumber beetles, either striped or spotted, on your farms?
I will say that having seen the picture of the green bean with the injury on it,
Yeah.
I had seen that on green beans in my home garden for several years before we started noticing the problem with the beetles in the squash and the cucumbers. So I would have to say that they have been around quite a while. We
Hmm.
just didn't really, I mean, we weren't really thinking about them in the, devastating levels that Brian experienced that one year.
So the interesting thing though is the striped cucumber beetles are typically they're only a pest on the cucurbits, and the spotted cucumber beetles are the ones that are a problem on beans. So you could either both are around that, but neither of them are. Um,
You're seeing the stripe or the spotted in Kitsap County?
I have not personally seen them. I've talked to two different flower farms in Jefferson County that had spotted cucumber beetles. I don't think I've seen those in Kitsap, but I don't see everything. You
So
know.
they like pollen? Is that the deal? Why they're in flowers?
Yeah, the spotted cucumber beetles, they have a much broader host range, but they're less likely to cause economic damage. I mean, they specifically are a problem on corn, in the roots. And I know we're not a big corn growing region around here, so and then sweet potatoes, which we haven't seen them be a problem on sweet potatoes yet. Um, and yeah, and then both types of cucumber beetles, from what I've seen, can cause damage to flowers and leaves. Um, but usually, unless it's the cut, on a cut flower farm or something like that, most the damage to the leaves and to the flowers isn't, it's not terrible.
It's interesting they
Can
call
you
them a
hear me?
cucumber beetle when I've seen them on everything but cucumbers.
Yeah, no. Um, let's see, somebody else had a question.
Those are Rebecca, yeah.
Yeah.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I do grow a lot of cut flowers,
Uh-huh.
and I have seen that striped one at my farm, but not the
Mhm.
spotted one. And I've not seen the striped one on cut flowers. But I'm curious to know more about what type of flowers we would be seeing the trouble on, and what would this pyrethrins, or what would be you can only keep cut flowers under remay for so long, before
Yeah.
you like start to contort them and hurt them. Like, could you just talk about cut flowers in general with these pests?
The only reports it's difficult to say whether they would become an economic pest on cut flowers. I don't know the answer to that question. The calls I've gotten are, folks who have dahlias and they're on the tubers, but if it's not a heavy infestation and you're not selling the tubers, um, then I don't know that you would even notice it. Um, but yeah, so it's just hard to tell. If you see them show it, you're gonna see them if they're on your farm. And so um that's the other hard thing, is that, for me, the cucumber beetles we're seeing now is a new thing. I had never seen them here before. I saw both of them when I lived down in the Willamette Valley, they were really common, but I had just never seen them here. But when I talked to some other colleagues at WSU, they said, oh, about 10 years ago, we had, there were a lot of problems with cucumber beetles. So it's hard to tell for me whether this is just kind of a cyclic thing and they might disappear, or if it's just that they've finally gotten to us, or if the weather's changing and it's more conducive, climate change. It's really difficult to say whether this is just a fluctuation in the populations or if they're here to stay and they're going to get worse. Um, so so I guess I wouldn't worry about it until you start seeing problems. That's the very long way to say it. Yeah.
I would say that knowing that they're here, it's not a bad idea to do a crop scout on
Yeah,
a regular basis.
absolutely. That's a really good point, Diane. Um, and I think all the folks who are on here are probably small enough farmers that you know your fields and your crops intimately. And yeah, it definitely helps to be constantly on the lookout and for anything new. Yep. And let's see, in the chat box, let's see. So John says, I have not had a problem with this on cucumbers or any summer or winter squash, but I do plant on the late side. So yeah. So it could be that planting on the late side helps for you, or it could be that you just don't have them yet.
What's interesting, I mean, I'm from back east, so we have cucumber beetles and beetles. They're big. These striped cucumbers are so small, you really don't even notice them. That's the thing about it, right? You could have some damage and not even know you have them.
Mhm.
Takes a little investigating fine eye to see them.
Yeah, it also doesn't hurt to invest in an insect net or butterfly net, some people call them. And if you just go and sweep the net over the top of your crops and see what you catch, that's another way. Just because you're right, they are oftentimes hiding in the foliage, or we know that they're out at different times of day. So using a sweep net, or looking underneath some branches and leaves. Yeah. I have an
So
extra sweep net if anybody wants to play with it.
if we catch them in our net, do we send them to you?
Yeah, if you catch something you don't know what it is, you can send me a picture or send me a sample, or you can give me a call and I can come out to your farm and take a look. Yeah, happy to do that.
So, Brian, have you seen them over at Morales? Because that's basically where John is growing.
No, they were at Middlefield Farm, which is like downtown, Wide and Weaver. And I haven't seen on any other farms, just that one place.
Do you know if Karen had issues over on Day Road?
No, that's where I was curious, right? Because she's growing acres of curettes. So, no, I haven't, I'm not aware of that. No.
Yeah, and I actually haven't seen either of them in Clallam County yet, but again, I don't see everything. So, yeah, you
Didn't
guys, Kitsap are just
didn't
lucky, right?
Midori have issues last year?
Yeah, I believe Midori has the striped cucumber beetles, yes.
Yeah, that's what I remember, yeah.
So they're moving west, but
Mhm.
we're still hiding out here in Clallam County. Yeah.
So how would they travel a long distance? How would you,
Um,
I mean, like bringing in compost from another area? They're hiding out in the,
yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but with the striped cucumber beetles, they're specifically looking for cucurbits, and we don't. In some areas, there's native cucurbits, like the common name is manroot. I just don't see that much around here, and so they're going to be jumping. If there's other squash or cucurbits within their range, that could be kind of a, hopping along. But I don't know how far that they'll fly without, um, I don't know how far they'll fly. I'll just put it with that. And I suppose I don't think you would find them in compost because they're I mean, I guess the adults could overwinter in compost. Yeah, but you wouldn't be getting the eggs or the larvae because the adults lay the eggs next to the host plant and they go through their life cycle there. So yeah, I guess if anything, it would be the overwintering adults, and I just wouldn't, I just
Would
can't
they
imagine
be in
that.
the vines?
Yeah, they can.
So you really need to get rid of your vines. You can't compost your vines.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is I just don't know that the adults would survive in the compost. Um, I just can't imagine a situation with a compost pile that was heavily, the finished product, I guess I'm saying, um, that would get moved around. I don't think you would find the adults in the finished product.
If you're rotating your compost pile and it's getting warm in there over, 150 whatever degrees, right?
Yeah.
Right?
But there are some people that don't aggressively move their compost, right? They have piles and they're not aggressively managing it. So it cold composts and it'll eventually break down, but it doesn't get hot enough to really be, and it's not agitated enough to really get rid of something that was just kind of cozying in there for the winter and hanging out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Hmm. Let's see, are there any other questions or folks that want to share their experience? All right, well, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. And particularly Brian and Teddy and Diane sharing your experience. This pest is a difficult one and there's just not a ton of research on it. So we're really grateful for what you've been able to share, what works for you. And we'll see you next
Thank
time.
you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.